Hey guys, Infidel1258 here. Today we're going to talk more about soulbound cards and the new issuance that's going to be starting really quickly. Within 48 hours, we're going to be seeing some new soulbound reward cards, which is exciting. And an end to an old one. They're unlockable. 10x their collection power is going to be the burn cost to make that liquid or transferable. These are big changes. And as we come to this moment in transition from one set to another, we recently heard the town hall, and in that Matt talked about the glint payouts associated with the game of Splinterlands and how they're going to increase at the lowest levels. And so I want to talk about the big picture of soulbounds. I want to talk about whether it makes sense to give more rewards to lower league levels. I want to talk about if I have concerns about issuing a greater degree of soulbound rewards for the lowest league levels of this game. If that sounds interesting, stick around and stay tuned. Okay, so if you're new to my channel, my name is Dwayne Cunningham. I go by Infidel1258, and I cover Splinterlands regularly because it's changed my life, and I think it's yours. And part of how it changes our lives, or how I think it might change one's life, is through the sort of revolutionary nature of offering reward for your time and attention. For years and years, video games offered nothing except for entertainment. Movies, cinema, books, we watch them, we buy them because we want entertainment. Games have this unique moment now, though, and maybe other media will in the future as well. But there's this unique opportunity because of NFT and blockchain video gaming, where we can be rewarded for our involvement, our participation in, our time committed to a certain game or a certain space. And Splinterlands is offering that. Soulbound rewards are part of that. Glint is part of that. These are the rewards we're receiving when we play the game. As we battle, we win X amount of SPS, and that's a liquid, well, after 4 weeks at least, a liquid resource that you can sell. But even immediately, you're going to get some amount of Glint and some amount of SPS and some amount of soulbound reward cards in that your Glint turns into soulbound. And so it makes a lot of sense that we would want, now that we have this distinction of liquid versus illiquid, SPS versus Glint and soulbound cards, it makes a lot of sense that we would consider or make sure that we've got dialed in the reward structure. Meaning, at the highest league levels, when we have people investing thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars into this, that they receive a significant and meaningful reward for that contribution and their time. I think that's pretty dialed in, and we've been fighting for that, I would say, for the last year, maybe even longer, maybe even a year and a half, as the team been really trying to refine the highest league rewards. But now in the recent town hall, we see Matt speaking to a restructuring of the reward system at the lowest league, implying there'll be a significant increase in Glint payouts to those participants. And that means the lowest league levels, these are people who might have spent tens of dollars or maybe hundreds at most to get an SPS bag and maybe a few cards, but not necessarily are they deep investors, or maybe not necessarily will they ever be. Is it a problem that we would be offering significant rewards even if those rewards are soulbound, locked up, non-transferable? I'm not entirely sure, but as we look at, I meant to show the reward structure that I got on that one. Skip it. 12 SPS after a period of time of unlock rating, that would be transferable, sellable. I could put the money in my pocket. The Glint, almost 1,000 Glint for that win, and I cannot move that, but I can spend it. And I think it's pretty. Like I said earlier, I think we're dialed in on the highest league levels for the reward structure and system. But at the lowest league levels, the new normal is going to be to see that they get every few wins they can unlock a card. Let's listen to Matt talking about this topic in the town hall, and then I'm going to come back with some more.
You know, we also plan to add some increased Glint earnings, especially for lower league players. Right now, the Glint earnings scale with the SPS earnings, and that makes sense that like our top players who have put in the most get like very significantly more SPS than lower level players. But for Glint, that's more focused around the typical like I don't want to say Web 2, but the typical like free to play game model where like people come in and they should be able to earn a relatively decent amount of rewards that keep them playing, keep them motivated, even at low levels. And the Glint system was built with that in mind. That's why all the stuff is soul bound that you can get with Glint, so that we're able to award it more liberally, like traditional games do, to kind of keep people motivated, which we're not able to do as easily with SPS or other like tradable rewards. So we're just going to basically bump up the Glint that lower level players earn. To make sure that if they play, like they don't have to play like win 20 battles before they can get one thing in the Glint shop. They'll be able to do like 3 or 5 battles. And our hope is that'll really help encourage new players and won't make any big effects on the economy, as the actual like total amount of Glint for those players is relatively low. And we've also addressed the issue already of kind of like bot armies being able to farm that. So that's all part of the ongoing process to make the onboarding and new player experience better.
So I'm going to stop them there. And there's a couple main things that I heard in there, and I want to draw your attention. The first is that significant increase to the bronze league and lower league level returns on Glint, meaning to a place where after 3 to 5 battles, you should be able to unlock a card, meaning you, with the amount of Glint you earn from a win, you should be able to come into shop and come into rewards and buy yourself a draw or a chest. And I do agree with the suggestion that is going to improve the new player experience. He implied that it will increase the retention of those players. He implied that that'll drive their interest in the game, and I think that's accurate. And I think generally speaking, it'll be a more satisfying experience when you actually feel you're receiving some sort of reward. Now, again, there's a distinction between transferable, non-transferable, therefore sellable, not sellable. And so he concludes by saying, because they're not transferable and because we've dialed in the bot issue, that we don't need to be concerned about it from an economic side of the game. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that, but I think it's worth spending a few minutes just unpacking some of my thoughts on that. The first is first point, though, before I go there, I want to affirm that people are talk about Splinterlands like Web 3, Web 2. It's not a Web 3, they say, and some people are super critical. And I would argue that it's okay if we navigate some sort of middle ground where we don't definitively fit within something that most would call Web 3, and yet we have Web 3 elements. And the same would be, we're not necessarily Web 2, but we have Web 2 elements. And so I would generally agree with what he just said there, which is okay. Superficially, at least, it makes sense that we might offer some kind of rewards to players that are new and not deeply invested, and that might be attractive and encourage them to stick around and invest their time and attention, which are not going to necessarily lead to financial reward. And yet, could be that bait on the hook to get them to go deeper into the game. So that all makes sense, and I think it's not inconsistent. If there's a naysayer out there that says, like, look, this is more proof we're not Web 3, I would say this is not inconsistent with being Web 3. It's just some sort of mix of the both of those worlds. And I do believe that those sorts of increasing that attractiveness to non-transferable assets will create more player retention, which should create more player investment, which should grow the economy and the ecosystem. Not just the economy and ecosystem, but the community itself and the number of voices that are enjoying and celebrating the game itself, all of which should be beneficial. But he did say that the issuance of more Glint and therefore more reward cards that are soulbound at the lowest league levels will not lead to a big effect on the economics. And let's talk about that now. I do think, as we imagine that there would be new cards being printed, whether it's today, tomorrow, or the next day, there's always going to be a certain amount of new cards being opened up through these draws. And that is going to be at a certain level with 5,000 or 8,000 daily active accounts, let's say today. But then if we 10x those accounts to 50,000 or 80,000, which I think is within the realm of possibility, you have to imagine that there would be a substantial increase in the draw. So there is going to be a great and dramatic increase in the number of soulbound cards that are being created. And then yes, they're locked up. Yes, they're soulbound, but we know that there's a pathway to have them unlocked. And so it isn't necessarily superficially accurate to say that the cards themselves won't have an impact on the economy. It's possible that they will. But, and here's maybe where we finish, if the soulbound cards get to a place where they are so greatly printed, because this new approach in attracting lower league players with soulbound assets, if the approach dramatically increases the player base, then yes, we will see a huge increase in the number of soulbounds created, but the question still remains, will they be unlocked? And interestingly, with any of the soulbound reward cards, we have to understand, and not everybody seems to get this, that it is okay if the cost to unlock is very high and it leads to maybe almost none being unlocked, because the few that do get unlocked will have a huge value. That becomes exciting for the game. It becomes a point of celebration for the participants who unlock those cards and a point of conversation for the community itself. All of that is good from an advertising and a word of mouth perspective. And so it's okay if very few get unlocked, because the unlock costs are expensive, because that'll draw some really scarce lines in the sand on the number of cards that are actually tradable, not usable, that are soulbound. That's interesting, but totally different. I'm talking about the ones that are transferable, sellable, and therefore monetizable. Because it isn't just the case that if there's 10x in the player base and then the soulbounds are 10x'd, they won't be exactly. But if they were 10x'd, there would be a huge number of cards, because these soulbounds that we're looking at on the screen are very prolific as well. But prolific in soulbound is almost irrelevant. And we've heard other accounts within this space, Aftersun, I think, being one of them, talk about how these soulbounds might actually be really scarce. These ones, the Chaos Legion ones, because if they're not unlocked, at some point they're going to be permanently locked. And then we have all the accounts that were, whether they're bots or they're people that have left the space, they're never going to unlock their soulbounds. And so it's not just how many are created, it's how many ultimately get unlocked. And it's okay if, it's not only okay if most don't get unlocked, because that, like I said, it draws an interesting sort of scarcity and excitement around those that did get unlocked. But also, if we get to a place where the player base grows dramatically 10x or 100x, which would be so insane, it would be amazing for our economy if they were unlocked. So I think I just spent 2 minutes explaining why it would be okay if they're not unlocked, because it would be scarcity for those few that do unlock them. But if every soulbound card gets unlocked, it's also amazing for the community, for the space, for the game, because it would dramatically impact the economics of Splinterlands, meaning DEC would be burnt huge amounts of it to allow that to happen. And so for those reasons, I think Matt's wrong in a major way when he says that the soulbound, that increasing Glint resources to the lowest league levels is going to not impact the economy of Splinterland. I think he's wrong, because it's necessarily going to impact it in a positive light. So it will impact it, but that impact will be a good thing. Either it's going to be impact option one, which means more players come because we're incentivizing lower league level players, and in that they create soulbound assets and they just play it at that level. That's at least going to grow our community. It's going to draw the eyeballs, whether or not they're investing significant money or not. Or option two, they come in hard and they actually start to love it and they start investing and become whales themselves, and they create crazy amounts of soulbound reward cards and then they burn those. I feel like either of these pathways would be a crazy, amazing success. And I don't really believe that there's a third option, which some will say, which is that these changes are not going to incentivize anybody. I pretty much just reject that, because soulbound assets, though non-transferable, non-sellable, non-financial in sort of their first level of understanding, are financial in their more in-depth understanding, in that as you play soulbound reward cards and level them up, you end up being able to win more often. In that last win, my Dry Bone Barbarian soulbound card, Venari Markstrat soulbound card, Captain Katie, not soulbound, but a gladiator, and it is soulbound, but it's not a reward card. And even Franz, so more 1, 2, 3, 4 my cards on that 6 card team were soulbound in some capacity. They add value to my account, financial in nature, even if they're not themselves transferable or sellable. And so I do think Matt's wrong in a big way about how this will not, he says it will not impact our game economically. I actually think he's wrong because it will in a good way. And so I'm excited. I'm excited for the change in the restructuring of the reward system at the lowest league levels. I think it will incentivize new. I think it will drive new significant investment, even if it's not at first, because you give them a taste, they find out they love it, and then they go deeper. And then 3, if they go deeper, you will see rewards in the sense of economic, because they'll either buy new cards, rent new cards, or burn DC into the ecosystem to unlock their own soulbounds, all of which help us as a community. And so I'm excited about that little announcement. And it doesn't even necessarily directly impact me. I don't play at those levels. But man, I think it can and it will for all of us because of the implications of what will flow from it. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Have an amazing day. God bless.